There we are. Well, good day to everyone joining us from across Canada. We're very pleased with the turnout today. We also want to remind you that if you or your friends want to watch the recording of this webinar, either to watch it again or for folks you might want to refer to it later, we will be publishing the recording. You will get the link to that recording, and it'll be on all our C.A.R.P digital areas, so you'll be able to see this after today's live viewing. As I say, I want to welcome everyone on this very important topic of immunotherapies. It's in you to fight cancer. Next. My name is Bill VanGorder. I'm the Chief Policy Officer at C.A.R.P, and I'll be your moderator for what promises to be a very interesting session with some very well-informed speakers who I'll introduce shortly. Next. At the end of the discussion, we'll have time to answer any questions that you might have. So please feel free to submit them whenever you wish by using the chat channel. You could also, you could do that by just clicking on the chat button and writing your question, which the panel will be moderated and brought forward by C.A.R.P's Anthony Quinn, who you just met. If you want any questions to be directed to a particular speaker, please tell us who that speaker is. Next. So before going any further, I do want to recognize that today is National Indigenous Peoples Day in Canada, a day to celebrate the cultures and the contributions of the First Nations, the Inuit, the Métis people, as well as to reflect on the work that still needs to be done to further reconciliation with Indigenous people in this country. As well, I am speaking to you from Halifax and would like to acknowledge that I am in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Next. So our topic today is immunotherapies. If you don't know anything or very much about what immunotherapies are, you're in the right place. Our goal over the next hour is to tell you what everyone should know about this important new type of treatment for cancer. Next. Unfortunately, we all know what cancer is. It'll strike 1 in every 2 Canadians. It's the leading cause of death in Canada, and it's a huge cause of illness, suffering, worry, and fear. Next. The Canadian Cancer Society estimates that more than 225,000 Canadians will be diagnosed with some type of cancer this year. For perspective, that number is about equal to the total population in any one of these cities: Kelowna, BC, Barrie, Ontario, Sherbrooke, Quebec, or St. John's, Newfoundland. Next. This is important to C.A.R.P and older Canadians because 90% of the people diagnosed with cancer are 50 years old or more. Next. The good news is that more Canadians are living longer after cancer diagnosis. 63% of Canadians who were diagnosed with cancer in 2012, 2014 are expected to survive for 5 years or more. This is up from 55% 20 years ago in the 1990s and from about 25% in the 1940s. That's great progress during the lifetime of many of us attending this event today. This progress has been made thanks in large part to more and better screening, earlier diagnosis, and new and more effective treatments. Next. Most of us are aware of the 3 traditional pillars of cancer treatment. The first, which has been tried for millennia, is the surgery. There's been great progress in recent years to make cancer surgery more precise and less invasive, and thus more successful for our patients. But early in the 20th century came radiation therapy, which has also been much developed and redefined in recent years. The latter half of the century brought us chemotherapy, which also has had significant progress over the years to improve its success and lessen the side effects. Now, in this century, we have a new fourth pillar of cancer treatment and immunotherapy. I say it's new, but the idea has been around for a long time, building on a key question: why doesn't our own immune system react to and kill harmful cancer cells in the same way that it fights harmful bacteria, viruses, and other invaders that threaten our health? In short, why do our bodies let cancer cells continue to grow and kill us? Well, those are some of the questions that have begun to be answered and have resulted in the development of new cancer treatments we call immunotherapies. Two of the leading developers of modern immunotherapy were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for Medicine in 2018. Next slide. We'll get more information about this in the first theme of our meeting with our experts as they tell us more about how they work and experience with them. The second part of our session with our panel will discuss the patient experience with immunotherapies. And finally, we'll wrap up and look to the future of this new pillar of cancer care and what we can look forward to in the next 5 years or so. Next slide. We have a great panel with us today. We really appreciate them taking time to share their knowledge and experience. Representing the medical community is Dr. Paul Wheatley-Price, a medical oncologist at the Ottawa Hospital Cancer Center. And to give the patient perspective, we're pleased to have Kathy Barnard, the CEO of the Save Your Skin Foundation, and herself a melanoma survivor, thanks to participating in an early trial of immunotherapy. Our third panelist, who will give us the research and development perspective, is Dr. Stéphanie Michaud, President and CEO of BioCanRx, a network of scientists, clinicians, cancer stakeholders, academic institutions, and NGOs and industry partners working together to accelerate the development of immunotherapies for the benefit of patients. So welcome to all three of you, and thank you for being here. C.A.R.P is holding this webinar because knowledge is power, and C.A.R.P aims to inform its members on many issues that are important to them. While we need to listen to health experts when we have health issues, we also have a role in ensuring we are informed about the key aspects of medical issues, including potential treatment options. This allows us to become better advocates for ourselves and our loved ones and be able to take part in making important decisions affecting our health and our life at what often is a most difficult time. We therefore hope you'll learn some things today that'll help you inform these decisions if and when you have to make them. So let's get on with the discussion. Welcome to our panelists. And I want to start out with a question to Dr. Wheatley-Price, and that is, in simple terms, can you explain how immunotherapy works and the benefits that you've seen so far in your practice?
Great. Thanks, Bill. Thanks for inviting me onto your panel today. Immunotherapy has really revolutionized cancer care just in the last 4 or 5 years by a new class of drugs, generally intravenous, that stimulate your body's own immune system to fight the cancer. And the reason that it hasn't worked so far is, and if you'll permit me to digress with a story based from a popular fiction, if those of you are familiar with Lord of the Rings, or The Hobbit, you'll be aware that Bilbo Baggins or Frodo Baggins, they have their magic ring. And when he puts on the ring, he becomes invisible and can escape the orcs and other terrifying creatures out there. And essentially, cancer cells have learned to have a magic ring. Now, it's not a magic ring, it's a chemical that sits on the surface of the cancer cell. But basically, it does the same thing. It means that the cancer cells are invisible to the immune system. So very differently, your immune system might identify a virus or a bacteria as a foreign entity that shouldn't be there and go ahead and attack it. But because of this chemical sitting on the cancer cell, or the magic ring, if you like, the immune system just passes cancer cells by. And what this new class of drugs have done is essentially they take the ring off. They block that chemical. They put a cap on that chemical on the cancer cell, so that suddenly the cancer cells are visible to the immune system. And then this part of our immune system called T cells are able to firstly identify the cancer cell as foreign, but then they activate. More of them come along and they go in and destroy the cancer cells. And what is that meant for in real terms? Well, I treat lung cancer primarily. Lung cancer is the most commonly diagnosed cancer in Canada. It kills more Canadians by far than other cancers, many other cancers put together. And immunotherapy has revolutionized this. And so what we see now is historically, most people with lung cancer would be diagnosed when the cancer had already spread, and we'd be talking about generally a poor prognosis. But now we can talk with very tangible hope. And I could point you to the examples of many, many, many people in my practice who are alive and well, often years later, because of immunotherapy.
Good, thank you. So Kathy Barnard, you've been through cancer yourself, as well as you support thousands of people who have been touched by cancer. What are your observations regarding how immunotherapies have impacted lives and survivorship?
Well, firstly, thank you for having me, Bill. And I would also like to respectfully acknowledge that I am located on the traditional and unceded territory of the Salix Okanagan people today. Well, I guess for me, I was one of the first to get an immuno-oncology when I was diagnosed. And since starting the foundation in 2006, we've seen huge changes in the melanoma space. So I was diagnosed in 2003. There were very few treatments, if any, for me with stage 4 metastatic. I had a couple of treatments, chemotherapies that were really more palliative in nature. And then I got on one of the original first generation immuno-oncologies. I actually had to bring it in from the US to a center in Canada, in Edmonton, Alberta. I had a partial response, so we were pretty excited about that, and started our charity to see how we could start advocating for patients. Unfortunately, 2006, when my cancer came back, I thought I was going to have to re-challenge that drug and really didn't want to, because the side effects were really quite harsh. And was told that the first immuno-oncology was available to me on Compassionate. So I had that drug in 2007. I've been clear since. I have to tell you, the melanoma patients, I always say, were at the back of the bus back in 2003 up until 2011, when we first started to see the first immuno-oncology in our subset of patients. So I always say melanoma is now driving the bus. Since 2011, the last 10 years, we've seen huge progress in innovative medicines coming into our space. And not only just in the stage 4 melanoma space, but in the adjuvant setting as well. You know, in the early days, I'm sure Dr. Price could tell you that it was learning for all of us, going from chemotherapy to immuno-oncology, using our own bodies. And it was learning for all in the beginning days. But now I have to be honest, the majority of our melanoma patients do survive. There's no doubt there are still side effects to be managed, but they're learning to do that very, very well. A lot of our patients actually work during treatment. So there's been a huge paradigm shift in that melanoma space.
Oh, thank you. Stéphanie Michaud, your network works with research in cancer therapies. Can you give us some impact that the immunotherapy is having on patients from your point of view? And did you anticipate such success? How is BioCanRx bringing research together to advance this further, and what is our potential for seeing even more research done in this area?
Thanks so much for that question. It's fantastic. And thank you, first of all, for the invitation. I, too, from where I'm sitting right now, would like to acknowledge that the land on which I am speaking to you today is the traditional unceded territory of the Anishinaabe people. So thank you. With respect to your question, the impact that immunotherapy, I mean, you've just had great examples, of course, from Kathy and Dr. Price, and the impact that immunotherapies are having on these types of cancers. And really, to quote Kathy, the availability of immunotherapies for treatment have really leapfrogged what used to be a very challenging, very difficult disease of melanoma of lung cancer to a disease that is much more manageable, and that is really directly related to immunotherapies. That being said, there have been phenomenal strides. New products are constantly on the horizon, but there still is quite a bit of research to do. What we're able to do now with respect to the advances in the development of these drugs is we're better able to determine who may benefit from receiving these drugs, but there's still a significant segment of the cancer population for which immunotherapies may work a little bit or not so well. And so what our network is interested in carrying out, or in terms of its research, is to really try to understand how we can use, for example, two agents in combination in order to, as Dr. Price, I may steal that ring analogy from you, how we actually take off that ring, what kind of flare can we send up to the immune system so that the cancer becomes visible. So overall, a huge impact. I think it's given an incredible amount of hope to all that these types of treatments are available, and we must celebrate these incredible scientific accomplishments. But for us in our research network, the day-to-day work of our network, our clinicians, is to try to reach the rest of the patient population, and there are some very exciting therapies on the horizon.
Thank you. How does the network work together on this on this issue? What's the difference between it and, say, just individual researchers and groups working?
Thank you for that. The difference is the combination of different expertise. As you can imagine, a lot of these drugs, immunotherapies, for the most part, not all the time, are what we call biologics. So in what we've heard, of course, fighting through this pandemic, is the limitation with respect to biomanufacturing, for example, that exists in Canada. And this is something that the BioCanRx network recognized since its inception in 2015 and really grafted onto. And so we've built out biomanufacturing both for cellular therapies and help bolster our manufacturing capacity in Ottawa, where our head office is located. So developing these types of drugs, it's about harnessing the power of the fantastic research that's taking place in Canada and really bridging that gap. And what is very difficult to do here, and where our funding approach is quite unique, is to take a product from what we call the preclinical to develop it before it is made available via clinical trial into patients, and to support it with respect to the clinical trial application, all of the biomanufacturing for these different products that are really complex that needs to happen, and then, of course, leading to the clinical trial so that patients can gain access to the best that Canadian research has to offer.
Good, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so a lot of, and we're getting questions in on the chat about the patient experience with immunotherapy. So first of all, to Dr. Wheatley-Price, how do you engage, communicate, talk to a lung cancer patient about whether immunotherapies are a possible treatment for them? Some patients are telling us in their questions that they wonder about feeling comfortable questioning their doctor and asking about particular treatment. Do you have any suggestion for patients to help empower them to ask questions, and the right questions, to let their doctor know what their personal goals and values are in order to help them be better informed in the discussion and understand what they're asking and what they're hearing?
Sure, yeah, I can certainly give them thoughts to that, and maybe I'll do this in a couple of dyads. So from a clinician perspective, I guess when I'm thinking about, when I'm meeting someone in the clinic for the first time, or we're thinking about treatment options, there are two main factors that we have to think about. There's the cancer factor, and there's the patient factor. So the cancer factor, and I've noticed some of the questions in the chat boxes, is this the right type of cancer for immunotherapy? So you've heard from Kathy that melanoma has really been the leader, if you like, the forerunner, the pioneer of immunotherapy in treating cancers. Lung cancer, not all types of lung cancer, but many types of lung cancer work very well with immunotherapy, as do many others. Some cancers of the head and neck, some kidney cancers can work very well. Some forms of lymphoma, other types of cancer, maybe not so much. There was a question about glioblastoma, and I don't really think glioblastoma is one of those forefront immunotherapy cancers right now. So there's the cancer factor, and then there's the patient factor. And from a medical point of view, the patient factors might be, well, are you well enough for this treatment? Do you have other medical conditions that we know don't react well with immunotherapy? So there are those factors that we have to consider. Generally, immunotherapy is tolerated very well. So it can have side effects, but they're usually minor, and rarely they're more serious, but they can be, those more serious side effects can in general be addressed. The second dyad is something that I learned from a mentor years ago, which is imagining that consultation that I have is a meeting of two experts. So I might be the expert in lung cancer. I can tell you all about the different types of lung cancer and the stages and the treatments and the side effects and the statistics and the prognosis and all of that. But the person sitting in front of me who is living the experience, they're the expert in how they feel, and they're the expert in what they want. And so it behooves me to make sure that as part of my conversation, I'm listening to the other expert in the room. And then together we come up with those goals and hopefully a plan of care that that everyone's happy with, that I'm happy is going to be safe and not put someone at harm and has got a good chance of working, and that Kathy or the person in front of me is happy to go ahead with. So it's that meeting of two experts, if you like.
Good. All right. Thank you. Kathy, we know that you and your Save the Skin Foundation are seeing a paradigm shift in terms of survivorship for patients who are diagnosed with melanoma. There are now many more people surviving melanoma than previously. What would you say to someone today with a newly diagnosed family member to help them understand how the cancer landscape has changed? And what advice would you give them to start them on the right path with their decisions involved in moving to new treatments?
I first tell them to never give up hope. Every day is a new day in cancer innovation. And I've seen that in melanoma. Every day is a changing day. I always remind people it's really important to build your team, whether that's your support group, your medical team, whoever you need around you to help you succeed in this incredible battle. And to look for reliable information. I think that's the problem. A lot of people, and I know this, when I was diagnosed, my GP said, don't go home and get on the internet. And I did, and so did my entire family. We went to see what Dr. Google had to say, and that was probably one of the biggest mistakes of my life. But then that being said, in those early days in 2003, there wasn't very much information on melanoma anyways. So my biggest thing for patients is find reliable information, build your team. There are a lot of incredibly credible patient organizations in this country. We all work very well together. Your healthcare professional team, there are nurse navigators now, there are pivotal nurses across this country. It's, if you are going to get your information, try to be sure it's reliable. You only have a limited amount of time with your oncologist. And I'm sure we'd like to be an equal partner in our decision-making process. So just make sure what you're going in to see your doctor with is as credible as it could be.
Sorry, I had muted myself to clear my throat and didn't get back to you. That's a good answer. Very clear. Thank you. Stéphanie, there are some exciting pieces of research going on at the moment, and clinical trials going on. Can you explain how these clinical trials offer an important way for Canadian patients to access the latest therapies, and what advice would you give to Canadians who want to find out if they might be eligible for a clinical trial?
Absolutely, and I just want to underscore that the advice that was provided by Kathy with respect to arming yourself with information is absolutely key. There is so much exciting research taking place across the country right now, and what we're seeing is these clinical trials that are being run that are assessing novel ways of treating cancers using immunotherapies, and in certain times using two immunotherapies in combination to see, as I've mentioned earlier, expand the reach of what immunotherapy can do for our cancer patient population. With respect to access to clinical trials, information is key. If one is comfortable, there is a very significant database that is run out of the US that is called clinicaltrials.gov. It is a very, very technical database, and so has been really the bane of existence for a lot of folks, because it is written in scientific medical language, and so at times comes across as quite inaccessible. And so some of the patient groups that we work with, that we collaborate with, have frequently implored us to, at least for the trials that we run in our network, to generate materials that are in accessible language. And this is what we've done at the BioCanRx network, and we'd love to see that expand. But to echo what Kathy has said with respect to access and obtaining assistance to see what is out there, the patient navigators, the nurse navigators are excellent. Reach out to the patient group organizations, and there are some that have individuals whose job it is to interface with you and carry out these initial searches. Of course, at the end of the day, any information that a patient finds or their family members find, this is something that you would be bringing to your doctor, to your oncologist, to have that dialogue and conversation with them, as they would be the ones to provide you with advice on whether or not you would be eligible, contacting, of course, the MDs that are running the actual trial.
Good, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
A question now, and by the way, to the audience, we are going to get very shortly to your specific questions, but a final question for each of the entire panel. We'll start with Dr. Price-Wheatley. What does the future hold? It's amazing, obviously, how far we've come in the past 10 years, but looking ahead, what do you see in terms of the future of immunotherapies with regard to cancers, say, over the next 5 years? Doctor?
There's a lot going on, Bill, and I think we can put it into a few buckets, if you like. Just in the last 6 months, we've learned that immunotherapy works really well in a rare type of cancer called mesothelioma, the cancer of the lining of the lung related to asbestos exposure. We didn't know that just 6 or 7 months ago. Just 2 weeks ago, at a major international cancer conference, we learned that we could give immunotherapy now after people with lung cancer at an earlier stage have had it removed. And it will significantly reduce the risk of a recurrence. That's new. Just last week, we reached a regulatory hurdle for approval of immunotherapy in a different type of lung cancer called small cell lung cancer. So this is going all the time. And I'm just talking about types of lung cancer. There's questions I see in the chat about breast cancer, colon cancer, prostate cancer, lots of different types of cancer. And, lots of research is going on in this. And we do know, and this might be discouraging to some, is that it doesn't work for everybody. there are certain types of cancer where immunotherapy is not the right treatment. And while it sounds like it would be a great thing to do, thousands of volunteers have gone through the studies to prove to us that in some situations it's not the right thing to do. But so we're going to learn, and we are learning. We're expanding the number of people, the number of indications for immunotherapy. There are new types of immunotherapy drug being in development now. So instead of giving one drug, there are new ones we can look to give in combination. So we're looking to give novel ways of immunotherapy. Right now, they're all intravenous treatments, requires trips to the cancer center fairly frequently. But now we're looking at maybe you can come less frequently. There's some even subcutaneous, just a little injection under the skin versions of the drugs being developed. No pills yet, although that would be exciting. Maybe a challenge that we face, and in your introduction, you highlighted that today is National Indigenous Peoples Day. We do have problems with equity in our country, and just a few months ago, the Canadian Partnership Against Cancer, or C.A.R.P, released a report on lung cancer and equity, which really was quite worrying. People from lower socioeconomic groups, people from rural areas, and then First Nations, Métis, and the Inuit population do have poorer outcomes from lung cancer. The Inuit in particular, in Nunavut, have amongst the highest rates of lung cancer in the world. So we do have to ensure that as these new treatments roll out, that we do find a way of making sure that all Canadians in all provinces and territories can have access to these treatments.
Good, thank you. Kathy Barnard, what do you see in terms of the future of immunotherapies from your personal and association's point of view? What are the changes you foresee or even hoping for in the next 5 years?
Well, I'm living proof that these innovative medicines work. And even what I've seen since 2011 in the last 10 years has been amazing. We've come a long way, but we're not quite there yet. We still got a long way to go. I've, now starting to see, we talk about, a combination IOs, there's words of triplets happening. What's old is sometimes new again. The first treatment I had, which is very seldom used for melanoma anymore, we saw an ASCO was coming back into melanoma in a combination with a newer molecule. I'd like to talk a little about the inequity, though. That's always been a huge concern for us across this country, is sometimes success is determined on your postal code. As patient organizations, that's huge for us. We want equity for all, good drugs for all, no matter where you live, who you are. That's a fight, I think, that as patient organizations, we will have to continue to fight in the near future. But I'd like to thank my co-panelists, because without the work they do, I absolutely would not be sitting in my RV on a lake in the Okanagan today. I will never be able to thank physicians and researchers enough for what they did for me and my family. And now my organization has had to be able to do for thousands of other Canadians, not just in melanoma, but we work so closely with other patient organizations. We want success for all in cancer, and that's our ultimate goal. So I thank my co-panelists for giving me the opportunity to still be sitting or standing. And again, thanks for the opportunity to be here.
Oh, thank you, Kathy. Well said. And finally, the same question to Stéphanie Michaud. What do you see happening in the next 5 years? We've come a long way. Where do you see us going as we move forward?
Absolutely. Thanks for the question. With respect to research and the future of clinical trials, I think that Canada is on the cusp of a great many number of new cellular therapy trials, specifically in the area of C.A.R.P. And to pick up on what my co-panelists have stated with respect to equity, both in the North and across Canada, sometimes, researchers and the kind of work that we do distances us a little bit from the patient perspective and their experience, their lived experience. But the situation is such that we still hear about it, and we are contacted by individuals from across the country looking to gain access to clinical trials, and who they should contact, and how they can potentially gain access to new innovative medicines in order to address their cancer. So this is a real situation here in Canada, and one that absolutely must be addressed moving forward. So new trials, new research, but what is absolutely essential, and the government of Canada has made some incredible investments in research, specifically in this past year, specifically in the life sciences, bringing online our biomanufacturing. But this is just the beginning. So much more is needed for Canada to have this vibrant ecosystem that is going to be able to support the development of novel medicines, that is going to be able to capitalize on the incredible investments that we've made in basic research and see them through to clinical trials, so that we can offer novel treatments to patients, not just in the big city centers of Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal, but at smaller sites across Canada and across the country.
Thank you. Well put. As I said in the beginning, the reason that C.A.R.P gets involved in these kinds of discussions is because we want to educate our members and their friends across the country on these issues, so you're familiar with them and able to discuss them appropriately with your medical professionals. So before we move to the questions some of you have asked, I do want to point out, in terms of that education, we are indebted to a company called Merck Canada for providing the funding to allow us to do this webinar today. Another example of the kind of cooperation that we get from the industry in terms of making sure we're able to carry these programs on to you. Anthony Quinn has been monitoring the questions online, and I'm going to call Anthony back in and ask him if he will ask the appropriate questions that have been asked for us. Anthony, over to you.
Thanks very much, Bill. Can everyone hear me all right?
Can do.
Terrific. There's a number of themes going on through the questions coming in from our attendees, and I thank you all for them. And I think the first question to address to many of the audience, and it looks like they're either living with cancer themselves or they have loved ones who are going through cancer now, and all the different variants of cancer. What advice would you give to the patient or their loved one as next steps? Now that they've heard about immunotherapy, they're asking what they should do next in their own case by way of bringing this to their own medical experts' attention and following up with their own medical advisor on getting more info about immunotherapy going forward. Perhaps Dr. Wheatley-Price can start with you.
Sure. Although we should also hear from Kathy, because she's lived that experience.
Yes.
You know, I think in general, clinicians like me and my colleagues across the country, our primary interest is in offering you the best treatment available. No one is interested in depriving their patients of access to a new treatment, really, for any reason. So, I think when you or your family member is sitting down with your oncologist, it's worthwhile just going through, what are my treatment options? I've heard about immunotherapy. Would this work for me? Would this be an option for me? Ask about access to clinical trials, because there are treatments that look extremely promising, or maybe we already know work pretty well, but they're not yet gone through the regulatory processes, but we can access them through trials. So ask. I think that's if I go back to that point of it being a conversation of two experts, you're the expert in how you feel and what your priorities are. So do ask that question. And I think what immunotherapy has enabled us to do is to treat more people with anti-cancer therapy that historically may not have been well enough or willing to receive some other treatments like chemotherapy. So I treat with immunotherapy numerous people in their 90s, for example, that would not have been well enough for chemotherapy. So, you know, I think have that conversation. Don't be afraid. If you're cautious about asking yourself, bring someone with you. Make a list of questions before you come, because sometimes in the moment of a consultation, the question just flies right out of your mind.
Well, that was the theme of the questions. Kathy, how can you tell us how you were made aware of immunotherapy and brought that to your own case, and how you got into those trials early on?
Okay, but that was a whole different time.
Yeah.
I just need to emphasize that because I found it myself. And that's really why the inception of Save Your Skin happened, because in the midst of being diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic cancer, the last thing you need to do is go and navigate and educate yourself. But what I do know is that knowledge is power. There is no doubt about it. What I've learned over the years with the foundation, that we have the most incredible oncologists in this country. You know, I know we are Canadians and we don't like to ask or inconvenience our specialists, but I can tell you more than often they are willing to hear us. Make your list, bring somebody with you. I always tell everybody, when I left my oncologist appointment, my husband and I heard two entirely different things. I heard that my scans were clear. He heard the doctor say good afternoon and thought the word good meant I was good. So I can't emphasize enough the importance of making sure you have that support network with you. Reach out to a patient organization. We have great organizations across this country. We work very closely with the oncologists to make sure that we're always in line. We never want to give patients wrong information or false hope. I never would have wanted that myself. So make your list, bring your support system, and ask. It never hurts to ask.
Thanks very much, Kathy. Stéphanie, the other question I wanted to ask was, when Bill showed the slides of the different treatments for cancer over the decades, we've now have immunotherapies, and it was mentioned that the researchers who brought it forth have won a Nobel Prize. Just how big of a leap is this discovery, and what do we see it? How big is it going to be in the future?
So we actually, I'm so glad that you asked that question. We recently, in a collaboration with the filmmakers company of the movie Breakthrough, which is the story of how immunotherapy, specifically what are called checkpoint inhibitors, have been developed, we were able to air this on our website in collaboration. And I and a graduate student last week sat down with the filmmaker to ask him about his experience of working with Jim Allison, who won the Nobel Prize in 2018 in concert with a Japanese colleague. This has been an absolute game changer, but it takes a very, very long time. Jim Allison is a trained immunologist. He had been working, he's American, been working in Texas, and in addition to a number of other cities for decades, in trying to unpack how the immune system works, and really how is the immune system able to do, to use Dr. Price's analogy, how is it able to put on that ring and disappear? And what are the things that we can, what that make it work in this way? And Jim Allison gave, through his research, was able to determine how one of those mechanisms work. He had great success in treating mice in his animal models, and then really took it upon himself to develop this as a drug to make it available to patients. This was his life's work. And I would say, we always hear the length of years that it takes to develop a product being anywhere from 15 to 18 years. And I would say in this case, that was right as well. That being said, I do believe that as a result of his work and the work of many, many others, it's taken the literal genie out of the bottle. And the explosion of research that is taking place in immunology, in cancer immunotherapy development is immense. And we see on a daily basis an increasing amount of clinical trials that are coming online so that patients can access. So there's an enormous amount of research, so many incredibly devoted, incredibly smart individuals working to better understand how they can harness the power of the immune system to achieve results like Kathy for more people. Thanks
very much. Bill, C.A.R.P is always advocating for increased access to universal healthcare treatments. A number of questions coming in about the cost and provincial access to these therapies. Do any of the panelists have insight as to how available immunotherapies are now, and is it widely available across the country? And are there added costs, out-of-pocket costs?
Sure, I can take that one. So the regulatory system in Canada for new cancer drugs is a little complex. It's a little time-consuming, laborious. I could throw in a few other adjectives if you like, maybe not before 9 p.m. But it does work, I think. Generally, it does work. And in Canada, I think we can be pretty grateful that we do get access to cancer drugs in general when they're proven to work. So provinces hold their own health budgets, and they're not going to pay for drugs unless there's a body of evidence that they work. So they won't just throw the drugs out like Smarties. But yes, it is. Immunotherapies are approved and funded publicly in all provinces and territories across the country for most of the indications for which there is good evidence, and that right now is multiple. So just off the top of my head, lung cancer, melanoma, certain types of colorectal cancer, urothelial cancers, kidney cancers, some other types of skin cancer, some Hodgkin's lymphoma. I think there's some coming for esophageal cancer. I don't treat all these cancers, so forgive me if I may have missed some there. But they're funded, they're available. They're normally an intravenous treatment. You have to go to a cancer center for them. The infusion takes between half an hour and an hour. No additional costs really that I can think of. Sometimes with chemotherapy, we're prescribing anti-nausea drugs to go alongside it, and there might be a cost with that. But with immunotherapy, you don't really need any supportive medications either. So really has been pretty good.
Can I add to that, Bill? The one thing that does work quite well in our country is that patients actually get to have their voices heard in the process. And that's another reason why, getting in touch with a patient organization that's, that houses your cancer, or doesn't even if you reach out to save your skin, when the drugs are going through the process, we have the ability to go out and do a survey to our patient database, their caregivers, even our oncologists, and we get to compile that information, and it gets looked at through the process. It's very unique in the world. I'm very proud of the process. So that's another reason why it's really important, as the patient and the caregiver, to be instrumental in the process, because your voice can be heard, and that does make a difference. The only thing that concerns me again is sometimes, we'll see a treatment come into one province and it can be up to 18 months before we see it on the other side of the country. That's a little bit worrying for me, because we want equal timely access for all Canadians, regardless, of where they live. So that's the only concern we have as they're going through the process.
Kathy, you're right, and of course that's been C.A.R.P's very strong position, is that there should be equal access to healthcare of all kinds, and especially this kind of life-saving healthcare equally across the country. And it isn't always, and that's something C.A.R.P is continuing to advocate for.
Bill, could I just jump in? In addition to my oncologist role, I serve with Lung Cancer Canada, which is sort of the lung cancer version of Kathy's organization, and patient input to every new drug submission. We've provided patient input, clinician input, and so and it really does make a difference. And we hear from this group CADTH, C-A-D-T-H, that's the group that does these assessments, that they really do listen to that. And what we're pushing for now with Lung Cancer Canada, I suspect Save Your Skin as well, is we're pushing the regulatory bodies now to invite patients to be part of their adjudication panels. So not just provide input to ask for a drug to be approved, but to be part of the panel that makes the adjudication. So if there are people out there who are interested in this type of work, there is, hopefully there'll be those opportunities coming.
Good point. Yep.
I'd just like to add to, with respect to the research that my organization carries out, there is very strong engagement of patients as partners in the research process. So we fund that research that takes something that is demonstrating good results in the lab all the way to the clinic via preclinical trial. But in getting from that initial point to a clinical trial, there is an immense opportunity to engage patients and to make that clinical trial even better, to be really responsive to the needs and to the wishes of the clinical trials. And we found it to be incredibly helpful. So for those that would like to be involved in research and helping us define what a clinical trial could look like, we'd love to hear from them.
Thanks, Stéphanie. Another question that was, I think, a theme that on everyone's mind is vaccinations, COVID, and mRNA technology. So one question was related to, does what we know about mRNA possibly help immunotherapy in the future? And are patients who are currently taking vaccinations for COVID, are they likely candidates for immunotherapy as well?
So if I could maybe just give the COVID answer very quickly, that if you're offered a COVID vaccine, go and get it, please go and get it. If you're on immunotherapy, that's fine, it's safe. One doesn't interact with the other. They work on different parts of the immune system. So if you have cancer, you are at higher risk of complications from COVID. Given this is C.A.R.P and this is maybe an older population, we know that the older we are, the higher risk we are as well. So hopefully most of you have been vaccinated at least once, maybe twice, but there's no problems with immunotherapy. If you're on chemotherapy, again, no problems with getting your vaccine. There may be some issue around just the exact timing, and speak with your team about that. In terms of mRNA, more messenger RNA research, I hesitate to say too much about that in that I'm not an mRNA expert. We do use mRNA, RNA, and DNA analyses to try and identify subtypes of cancer that will respond to one treatment more effectively than another. I may be wrong here. I'm not aware of any mRNA research that is guiding those decisions in immunotherapy quite yet.
And Stéphanie, was there anything on your side to add there? You're on mute.
Thank you. It had to happen at least once today. No, to echo what Dr. Price has said, no, I'm not aware of anything.
Thanks. Bill, I'm looking at the clock and I'm mindful of the 1 hour time limit. Dr. Price, Wheatley-Price mentioned that patients of older age groups have been participating in immunotherapy, and we have a great story in our Q&A about someone's mother who lives in Israel and is 97 years old and being treated successfully with immunotherapy. Can you just again reiterate to our C.A.R.P audience that age is not necessarily the determining factor in these therapies, but the individual candidate? To Dr. Wheatley-Price or Stéphanie?
Age is not. Yeah, age is not a factor. No, it just isn't. We know that with chemotherapy, even with chemotherapy, age really is not as much of a factor. It's really about how fit you are. We do know for chemotherapy for people over the age of 80, it's more challenging. But with immunotherapy, you know, the drugs are easier to take. They have fewer side effects. The worry with somebody who's elderly is not their age, it's are they frail, and the worry is if somebody is more frail and they were to get one of the more difficult side effects, could that really be detrimental to them and end up the treatment being worse than the condition itself? So those are the things we kind of have to balance. But age per se, not a problem.
Thank you very much. I'll go around the table once again and ask for your concluding words, and then we'll thank our panelists and end the webinar. Bill, I'll go to you first on C.A.R.P's interest in this technology and our message to all of our attendees today.
Well, the message is threefold. One is that we want our members and their friends to have a better understanding of this new technology. That's the reason we're doing the webinar today. That's why it's being recorded, so it can be shared widely with anybody else who is interested in it, so that you and your loved ones have the right information and the right questions to ask when you talk to your medical professionals about your particular situation. The second part of it is that C.A.R.P continues to advocate for the best available medicines being available equally right across the country. Not the cheapest or the easiest delivered, but the best available. And we continue to urge the provincial governments to cooperate more federally in terms of making sure this happens, and to get rid of unnecessary red tape, so it doesn't take as long for some provinces to make these therapies available. It takes longer than in other provinces. And the third message is this is a changing area all the time, as we heard our panelists tell us today. C.A.R.P is going to do its best to keep you up to date with what's happening, but we urge you to do your own research. The best patient is the educated patient. We're going to do our best to help you do that, and we hope you'll join C.A.R.P in making sure that you're up to date, so that when and if the terrible time comes that you have to make some decisions like this, that you'll have the information you need to make the best decision for you.
Thank you, Bill. And I'll ask Kathy now from the Save Your Skin Foundation for some final thoughts as we head out.
Firstly, thank you for having me, C.A.R.P, but thank you for providing this information for your membership. Because again, knowledge is power. We know that. And again, this information changes daily, monthly, yearly. But again, thank you for providing that for your membership. I think it's so important. As a patient, I just say never give up hope. There's always a new day around the corner. And again, to my co-panel, keep up the great work, because I honestly want to be on this panel when I'm 92. So, you know, just keep up the good work. And thank you for everybody and everything you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. And Stéphanie, a word from BioCanRx.
Sorry about that. A second time in one session, unacceptable. So thank you so much for the invitation. It's great to be able to speak of the research that's taking place across Canada. There are so many laboratories across the country that are working hard to and bring the best minds together in order to develop novel approaches to treating cancer. So thank you for the opportunity. And to your membership, for those of you that are interested in learning a lot more about immunotherapy and how it works, with an eye to potentially partnering on projects with our researchers in our network, I invite you to contact me, contact members of my team. You can simply go to our website, or you can shoot me an email. we run this wonderful program called the Learning Institute, where we will pair you with a graduate student, a medical student, to enable the attendance of our annual conference. And it's with an eye to engaging you in participating in a research project as a partner and to contribute. So for those of you that are interested, we'd love to hear from you.
Thanks, Stephanie. And what is that website?
It is biocanrx.com.
Very simple. Thank you, Dr. Wheatley-Price.
Thanks, Anthony and Bill, for inviting me to be part of this. You know, I hope that if you're listening to this, you've kind of heard that there's been really this dizzying pace of change just in the last few years with this explosion of immunotherapy on the cancer scene. For so many people, thousands of lives have been changed for the better, and many of them not just a little bit better, just dramatically extended life and improved quality of life. As an oncologist, you know, it's hugely encouraging to be in my clinic. Every clinic I'm in now, I'm seeing someone who's been on immunotherapy for ages and is doing really well. And I never used to get that. So personally, I'm encouraged. Scientifically, we're encouraged. So many patient lives are being changed. It's really brilliant. We need to do better. We need to continue to improve. We need to address equity. But, you know, we're all part of this together. Bring your questions, bring a person to your consultation, and then we'll find the right treatment for you.
Thank you, Dr. Wheatley-Price, and to all our panelists. A reminder to everyone that this has been recorded and C.A.R.P will be sharing it on our website and social media channels. So if you didn't see the entire thing or you want to share it with your friends and family, that'll be